Hi, this video is not really going to have any visuals or background music since some limiting factors involving software issues that only got resolved yesterday as of recording this. And I'm uploading this today as of recording this. You know iceberg memes, right? They're a pretty cool meme format, but has anybody ever really done anything with the fact that they are called iceberg memes? Welcome to the Antarctica iceberg. I'll be skipping the first tier as most of it is either really bare bones facts or X in Antarctica entries. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what It's Called or Antarctica Pride Parade refer to. Tier 2. Argentina-Chile baby wars. Chilean and Argentinian claims of Antarctican land are all overlapping because Argentina and Chile are both close enough to Antarctica and border each other. In attempts to further legitimate their claims, they have sent pregnant or newlywed couples to their territories in hopes of them having children there that they can claim are Antarctican nationals, but also Argentinian or Chilean nationals. Soviet chess murder. In 1979, the World Chess Championships were to be held in Antarctica, chosen because of the heavy association with the continent and science. Rumors started swirling when Russian quarter-finalist Vladimir Romanov was found dead during the break between the quarter and semi-finals. The official story is that he was attacked by a group of Adelie penguins, more on that later, though people who read into the case almost unanimously agree that it was the FBI, which seems weird because I'm pretty sure that's an act of war. Religion in Antarctica. Sometimes there are people in Antarctica who are religious. Further entries will expand on this more. Metallica concert. On the 13th of May 2010, Metallica visited Antarctica as part of their reunion tour. It is one of the only 9 concerts to ever be held on the continent, but by far the most attended because Metallica is a band that people would actually go to see. Adelie penguins are arseholes. As mentioned in the earlier Soviet chess murder segment, Adelie penguins are easily the most aggressive species of penguin, having been ruled as the cause of death for at most 41 people, Romanov not included. This has been attributed to the starvation due to overfishing in the shores near where they live. The thing viewing at South Pole Station. You know those scientists, guys? They're some funny folk. One instance of scientists being funny was on August 8, 2019. Where researchers stationed at the South Pole put on a viewing of 1999 John Carpenter movie, The Thing. They actually streamed their viewing straight to Twitch so you can see the whole reaction at, I don't know, somebody's probably archived it. McMurdo's South Pole Highway. There is a highway bisecting the South Pole that's named after Harold Patrick McMurdo, an archaeologist who discovered the fossil of Dimetrodon, proving that Antarctica wasn't just a loser continent that hung around the South Pole all its life. More on this later. Lunatic. Band. Lunatic is a band of 4 maintenance workers who found themselves with nothing to do during the winter months outside of their weekly jacks. They mostly do covers of songs that vaguely fit the theme of Antarctica, like Winter Wonderland or anything off the Beatles' White Album. Also, their music sucks. Like, I know I'm not that professional of a music listener, but like, it is not good. There are towns in Antarctica. Sometimes there will be settlements in Antarctica big enough to be towns. Corner sledding incident. Corner sledding is a technique in extreme sledding where you sled while only having one corner of the sled on the ground. Basically the sled equivalent on the wheelie. On 20th of June 1996, the second ever extreme sledding competition began in Antarctica. Only on the second day though, in an attempt to pull off some corner sledding, one Hans Lombardy flipped his sled over and went tumbling down the mountain, ending his life. This ended the competitions. Until the year 2000 because 1, it was the millennium, and 2, these people have no respect for the dead. Jewish law in Antarctica. Judaism is a religion that's pretty serious about rules. No work on the Sabbath and whatnot. However, in the modern era, these rules can end up being extremely hard to follow, especially simultaneously. So, when Jews head on down to Antarctica, perhaps the hardest place for a man to live, religion or no, these rules are lifted more than usual. Of course, this only applies to certain sects. Orthodox Jews just tend to stay away from the continent altogether. Sheafbills. Sheafbills are a species of shoebills that adapted to the Antarctic climate by growing a heavy mat of feathers over their beaks, the only uninsulated part of their body. It's unknown how they got all the way from Southeast Asia to Antarctica, but the modern theory is that they were taken to Antarctica by some eccentric explorer back when people didn't know for certain if Antarctica was just a big ice continent. Meteorites in Antarctica. Sometimes there'll be objects in space that land in Antarctica. Taro and Jiro. Taro and Jiro are the names given to the first pair of penguins to be spotted engaging in homosexual behavior named by Hikari Fujisaki whilst doing field research in 2009. These penguins would later get a surge of popularity on the Japanese internet when covered in a blog post by Hikari herself, recollecting on her time at Noboura's research station. Great Ice Barrier. Since most flat Earth maps use the North Pole-centered Heinz-Baker field projection, Antarctica is an interesting place for them since not only should it be much larger than it actually is, but it surrounds the edge of the disk. This has prompted them to make many Antarctica-related sub-conspiracies, one such being that Antarctica is actually a giant ice wall that's doing something. McMurdo Dry Valleys. The McMurdo Dry Valleys are where McMurdo made his discovery. They're known for being the only place in Antarctica that goes without snow year-round, because it's stuck between two very tall mountains which create a super rain shadow effect that more or less prevent any clouds from coming over. Penguins like April Fools. On April Fool's Day 2013, Nat Geo uploaded a video to their YouTube channel of penguins doing a flight. There's not really much to say about this because it's not that interesting. Some normally non-lying folk did some lying on the nationally agreed lying day. Sydney Railway. Sydney Railway is a railway first developed to transport materials between Sydney North and Sydney South research bases. The system later expanded to cover most of eastern Antarctica because transporting in the cold is tough. Antipodes. Antipodes are 2 points on Earth's surface that are directly opposite each other. Antarctica has quite a few antipodes, mainly over Greenland, some Canadian islands, and parts of Russia. Some Antarctic towns and research bases are even built to be on the antipodes of certain points, though not many because just as few people like living in the far north as they do the far south. China-Australia proxy war. This entry is certainly overblowing things. Due to the Antarctic Treaty, countries can build their research bases anywhere on Antarctica, without regard to pre-existing territory claims. The Chinese research bases are all built on the Australian claim because 1. The Australian claim itself is very large, and 2. It's due south of China, so transport is much easier. However, some conservative members of the Australian Parliament have labelled it as an act of aggression because we already have a light tension with China. It's really nothing that's actually serious, though. Churches in Antarctica. Sometimes, in a town in Antarctica, there'll be enough religious people to raise sufficient interest in a religious establishment, like a church or a mosque. Mordred's Polynya. What the hell's a Polynya? On an expedition to the South Pole in 2022, a group of researchers took a fairly standard route which crosses over Mordred's Plateau. When they tried to take a rest in a cave, they found it was already being inhabited by a group of polyamorous catgirls. The discovery was very recent, so we still don't know much about it, compounded by the catgirls preferring to stick to themselves rather than be studied. Some catgirls have struck out on their own though, and we know much more about them thanks to that. Gombertsny Mountain Range. The Gombertsny Mountain Range is the main mountain range that spans across Antarctica, being the only non-snowfield biome outside of the coast. Antarctica ATMs. Another feature of Antarctican towns, people are capitalists in them. Disgusting. Unfortunately, Antarctica hasn't gone cashless yet, so they use ATMs to get cash. Antarctic accent. In 2018, there was a study done on a research station staffed with 4 Brits, an American, an Australian, and a German to see how their accents would develop over their isolation. They didn't shift too much, but it was discovered that the way they pronounced that O shifted rather greatly compared to all the other vowels. Louise Seguin. Louise Seguin was the only ever person to win the Miss Antarctica beauty contest. She was from a French research base, and no one has been able to follow her up since the scientists hosting realized that it didn't have much worth beyond a one-time joke. Tier 3. Mount Erebus disaster. Back when having research bases in Antarctica was still fairly new, there was one set up around a volcano called Mount Erebus. Safety wasn't really a big thing back then, so the only measures they had in case of an eruption was to have somebody notice one coming on the metrics and evacuate the base. Unfortunately, when an eruption did start building up, the last of the researchers up had just fallen asleep, and the volcano had already erupted by the time that the next person would have woken up. Operation 90. Operation 90 is a scheme concocted by Argentina to further legitimate their Antarctic claim, something important to them considering it overlaps with Chile's and Britain's. The plan never ended up going through since the Falklands War took up all of Argentina's war with Britain resources, but it's still notable for being the only ever earnestly planned military action in Antarctica. Hope Bay Incident. On the 19th of July 2002, a giant iceberg just kinda floated by the coast of Hope Bay, South Africa. There hasn't been an official explanation, and the most popular conspiracy theory is that it just slipped out in what was essentially a naval test of shooting icebergs at opposing battleships as a weapon. It's no better than being unexplained. Antarctica has rivers. Sometimes, in Antarctica, there will be liquid water that flows towards the ocean. René Nicole Ducour stroke. The René Nicole Ducour stroke is a special kind of swimming stroke designed to help survival in cold Antarctic waters. It was invented by René Ducour and Nicole Baptiste Ducour as part of an evacuation plan for icebreaker capsizing. ARA Bahia Paraíso sinking. The ARA Bahia Paraíso was an Antarctic cruise liner. It sunk back in 2011, and its sinking caused a much higher rate of casualty than most other cruise sinkings because 1. Antarctic waters are cold, and 2. It was off the coast of Antarctica, so not exactly many resources to save people stranded. Livingston Island 1976 plane crash. Oh yeah, this part of the iceberg has a lot of crashes, 7 in a row. Anyway, the plane crash into Livingston Island was because the pilot thought that the island was an iceberg that would drift out of the way. And yes, you are correct, icebergs don't drift that fast. Antarctica PBM Mariner crash. The Antarctica Public Broadcast Service Mariner crash was a crash of a subnautical device that was being used to broadcast educational TV to mermaids on the channel PBM, along with most other mermaid TV. Details about the crash have only been revealed recently with the master classification of all documents related to mermaiddom on January 2024. Terra Adeli helicopter crash. Terra Adeli is known for being the island the Adeli penguins were discovered on. On a day when a research trip there was scheduled, the penguins were feeling particularly peckish, so they formed a big wobbly penguin tower for the helicopter to crash into. The scientists didn't have any time to react, but on the bright side, only 3 scientists and 1 pilot was on board, and 68 penguins died in the tower collapse. McMurdo Station crash. McMurdo Station is a station connected to the far west end of a McMurdo highway, and there was a crash there, because the car was going too fast. Rafera Research Station plane crash. Yeah, I gotta start speeding through these. Rafera Research Station. It was in the French territory. A plane crashed into it. Money Station plane crash. Money Station. A stop on the Sydney Railway. A plane crashed into it. Mobile Point plane crash. Mobile Point. One of the highest peaks in Antarctica. A plane crashed into it. Progress Station fire. We may be done with the crashes, but no with the fires. Progress Station, named that way because the station had an astounding quantity of gay people, had a fire. The explanation for the fire is that queer people are particularly bad at handling flammable chemicals, something I can attest to. Comandante Ferraz 2012 fire. Comandante Ferraz, an outpost in both the Chilean and Argentinian claims. It got on fire. Australian Antarctic expedition deaths. Way back in 1909, there was an expedition to Antarctica led by Australia. People died because they didn't pack properly for the cold. Antarctica cooling controversy. On the 4th of April 2017, NASA released an annual report on global warming and the shrinking of the ice caps. The part on Antarctica mentioned how it's actually growing. Of course, right-wing climate denialists latched onto this as evidence that global warming is all made up. This is ignoring that the northern ice caps were shrinking at 3 times the rate the Antarctic ice cap was growing. SY Aurora's drift. The SY Aurora is a research ship used to study fish populations off the eastern Antarctic coast. It has become notorious for promotional social media posts showing off the extreme maneuverability of the vessel, even against strong currents. Jung-woo 2. Jung-woo is a Korean scientist who is famed among Antarctica nerds for his research on the continent's tectonics. On the r/Antarctica subreddit, he became so beloved that there was a change.org petition to create a Jung-woo 2. You know, from the meme, if Jung-woo's so good, then why isn't there a Jung-woo 2? Even more amazingly, Jung-woo and his associates actually listened and sent some of his cells back to Korea to clone a small stem cell colony out of. Sung sinking. The USS Insung was an experimental nuclear submarine that mysteriously disappeared. The story is that giant squids got it, which is believable, but my research has uncovered a different story. You see, since the Insung was a military vessel, it wasn't allowed in Antarctic waters. The radar relay had accounted for this and was programmed to cut off in case that it entered waters it wasn't meant to be in. The crew noticed this, and, hoping to avoid the diplomatic incident, crawled into the non-offensive life sub and concocted the giant squid story. Icefish blood color. Certain species of Antarctic icefish have blue blood, attributed to a protein developed to help them survive in the cold waters. Why this mutation hasn't been repeated in other organisms is unknown. Penguin slap hoax. On April 14th, 2019, Naomi Kusaka would quit her job. The claim was that she was slapped by a penguin and no longer felt safe. Most people saw through it immediately, and while it didn't take long for her to admit that it was a hoax, she never revealed what she was covering up. Didn't stop right-wing grifters from getting their Mars worth out of it, though. Penguin highways. Penguin highways are an extra bonus lane in Antarctic highways meant for penguins to sled along. Penguins don't really use them much, as there's too much lava snowfields for them to slide along either side of the highway, but the breather space does help when crossing the road. Robert Falcon Scott was innocent. Robert Falcon Scott was the guy at Nat Geo responsible for putting together the Flying Penguins video. The theory postulates that Robert Falcon Scott hadn't actually done anything, and that the penguins just did that. Tier 4. Hope Bay 1948 Fire. The 1948 Hope Bay fire is the natural antithesis of the Hope Bay incident, where instead of an iceberg, a fire pool passed by. Nobody knows what the hell happened. Kirsty Brown death. On January 11, 2017, the corpse of 22-year-old Kirsty Brown was found in the British Antarctic Territory. Upon further inspection, the corpse seemed fairly well intact, likely having died of frostbite. The biggest question was how she got there, as she was from Chicago and got missing only a month prior. There are two theories. One states that since she was an engineering prodigy, she was able to craft a small flying machine that had enough fuel to last her until she reached Mexico, where there wouldn't be any missing persons posters to recognize her from, and she then died in a much less prepared trek to the South Pole. The second theory says that she was swallowed up by a time pole. It could go either way, honestly. RV Belgica deaths. The RV Belgica is a modern ghost ship that is docked in Port Burnsley in 2021. An investigation was held into the incident, but was quickly called off as, quote, the head scientist, "We daren't rouse whatever killed these men." What's known to not rouse it is the fact that it made it to shore using its experimental autopilot. Lenin bust. Frozen under the South Pole is a bust of late Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin, put there by Soviet expeditionists in 1971 for some weird monumentality purposes. No one's tried excavating it since it's Soviet property, but in an extra measure, the team made sure to put it at the bottom of a 50-meter hole. Unfrozen water in Antarctica. As mentioned in the prior Rivers in Antarctica segment, sometimes there'll be liquid water in Antarctica. Christmas 2007 South Pole Brawl. Just as there exists a Santa Claus at the North Pole who brings joy to children, there must exist an Antas Claus who brings pains to adults on the same day. This is the philosophy of Swedish scientist Herman Sterlson, who upon scheduling an unexplained trip to the South Pole started a fight with his colleagues for no other reason than it being his, quote, polar duty. Treaty of 1959. The Treaty of 1959 was the predecessor to the modern Antarctic Treaty, which was much less strict and only really had a ban on exploitation of resources. Most of the countries who signed the Treaty of 1959 also signed the later Antarctic Treaty, with the sole exception of Turkey, who is still operating off of old Antarctic law. First Russian Antarctic expedition. Back in 1876, back when Russia was still ruled by the Emperor, they held an expedition to the South Pole for expedition purposes. What's so notable about the expedition is that the records kept from the expedition don't match any other information about Antarctica, saying that the South Pole was actually covered in water and had a species of white bears instead of penguins. Do you see the problem? The expedition team got so lost that they went to the North Pole. McMurdo Station hammer attack. At McMurdo Station, some guy just showed up with a hammer and started hitting the doors trying to get in. Obviously this didn't work since the station was built to withstand harsh weather, so after 4 hours of constant hammering, they stopped. It's technically not known what happens to them, but odds are they just left the same way they came. Operation Tabarin. Operation Tabarin was a suggested scheme in Turkish parliament to capitalize on the fact that Turkey is still on the old Antarctic law. There wasn't much rhyme or reason to it since it was an especially slow day in Turkish politics. But who knows, maybe one day it'll be revived and we'll have to deal with the fact that Turkey now owns the whole continent. Nelson Island plane crash. After a standard flight over Antarctica from Perth to Buenos Aires, Qantas Flight 318 attempted to make a pit stop on Nelson Island. Unfortunately, the pilots flying the plane were complete buffoons, and there was no runway on Nelson Island. The pilots realized their utter incompetence too late and made a crash landing, and weren't able to take back off, stranding the 218 passengers and crew. Marguerite Bay plane crash. It's the fucking plane crashes again! Marguerite Bay, known for cool minerals constantly being discovered there. A plane crashed into it. 1964 tractor accident. South Sydney Station, 1964. Someone takes out the tractor to do some field research. They fall down a cave. Philippine Glacier plane crash. Philippine Glacier. Named that way because the person who discovered it just really liked the Philippines. A plane crashed into it. 1961 Wilkes Station plane crash. Wilkes Station. It's in the New Zealand territory. A plane crashed into it. 1969 New Mayor Station 3 helicopter crash. New Mayor Station studied local geothermal happenings. 3 different helicopters crashed into it in 1 year. Ross Ice Shelf plane crash. Ross Ice Shelf, named after my boy Ross. A plane crashed into it. Carl R. Dish disappearance. Carl R. Dish is a name given to former radio dish at Rothera's research station because, as mentioned earlier, scientists are funny people. Recently, on 9th of May 2023, the entire dish part of it disappeared. This was first noticed when their internet suddenly cut out whilst analysing some signals they were receiving from the ISS. It was first thought that they had disappeared completely until one scientist showed up at McMurdo Station after a 4-hour drive they made the first thing the morning after. Victor Hayward. Victor is a popular Antarctic conspiracy theorist responsible for popularizing the concept of Antarctica being completely off limits to the common folk. This is, of course, untrue, but it can be very convenient if you believe other untrue things. Conflicto Antarcticus. Conflicto Antarcticus was the scientific name given in a 1926 investigation into an unidentified attack on an Antarctic expedition in 1924 to a highly aggressive animal that bore a black and white coloring. Modern speculation suggests that it was an Adelie penguin, but they weren't as aggressive back then due to there still being enough fish, no? Julia Sound. Julia Sound is a method of measuring the topography of ground beneath ice sheets developed by Julia Nguyen. It's been criticized for the fact that it can be very damaging to the ice sheets and, if overused, can send them crashing into the ocean. For this reason, it's only used in regions that Antarcticans are sure have solid land underneath. Cabagon. In medieval Christianity, so Catholicism, Cabagon is the patron demon of the cold. It is said he existed in the coldest place on Earth and lured people who strayed from their companions to their death. Aside from being the villain in that 2000s CGI Christmas movie I can't remember the name of, Cabagon's only brought up randomly in sermons if the priest or pastor wants to talk about Antarctican goings-on. Large Antarctic sea mammal. Tourists to Antarctica often describe having seen large, boxy, whale-like creatures when they travel to the shore. This one's not worth sugarcoating. Those are sperm whales. Sperm whales aren't the most popular kinds of whales, so some dumb tourists see them for the unique shape and go, "What's this?" Fossilized sperm are found in Antarctica. Now, you may hear this entry title and go, "Hey, aren't sperm too small to be fossilized?" And you'd be right. This entry is the first in a series of what I'll call, geez, these people in Antarctica got real horny, because somebody came in the ice. Man who was stranded in Antarctica for 900 days dies a couple years later after being hit by a bus. So, how do I explain this one? There was this guy who got stranded in Antarctica for 900 days, and then when he got home, a couple of years later, he got hit by a bus and died. Tier 5, Lake Vostok Deep Biosphere. Lake Vostok in Mary Birdland is one of the deepest lakes in the entire world, so long as you count the area surrounded by an ice shelf. This has led to it being the only lake with an ecosystem similar to that of deep-sea trenches. Scientists speculate that it did not develop independently and instead was a holdover from when Antarctica was still part of Gondwana. Deception Island volcano incidents. Deception Island is an island that's constantly zipping around but tends to spend most of its time docked in Antarctica. I won't explain the mechanics of its movements or why it's called Deception Island, but note that it's still when no one's on it, and that people who do go on it always report coming out at a different place than when they've started. This entry refers to the volcano on Deception Island, and how it combines with the movement. Normally it's spewing on volcanic fumes in the way that all other volcanoes do, in place. But when someone's on it and the volcano erupts, the fumes leave a trail spreading yucky volcano gas everywhere. San Telmo Survivor's Theory. Seasons of the TV show Survivor are usually filmed in remote locations, and when it came to speculation about where the 31st season would be filmed, fans suspected that they would go somewhere near Antarctica, specifically the island of San Telmo, based on certain clues left in social media posts. The season ended up being filmed on an unnamed atoll off the coast of Christmas Island, which I guess fits the Christmassy clue but none else. Yamana Beach Grave. Yamana Beach was technically the first place the ship ever landed on in Antarctica, so the ship had all its crew killed and lower hull destroyed in the storm. At Yamana Beach today there stands a monument to the crew. Aeneas McIntosh disappearance. Aeneas McIntosh was one of the biggest investigators into the global conspiracy to cover up mermaids. He disappeared back in 2018, with a mermaid revealing that she was paid by the French government to lure him to his death, by jumping off an Antarctic cruise liner in the middle of the night. New Swabia. If I had covered Layer 1, then you'd know that Mary Birdland is one of the largest unclaimed territories in the world, so long as you don't count all of Antarctica as one. Because of this, various randos have tried to claim Mary Birdland for themselves because there's nothing stopping them from doing so, other than the Antarctic Treaty. The first of these was one Mark Wilson, who chose the name New Swabia by picking a suitably random word and building a place name from around it. Operation High Jump. What if there was an Olympic medalist from Antarctica? This was all the reasoning needed for a Chilean athlete, an offspring of the Argentina-Chile baby wars, Martinez Naranjo, to chase his dream. His training was partially bankrolled by the Chilean government, who thought if one of the Antarctican children they made oh so long ago became big enough on the world stage, it would legitimate their claim even more. They only gave him like $50 though. Great penguin extinction. Penguins. They're probably gonna go extinct soon if we don't do something. Uite Rangiroa. Uite Rangiroa is an alleged recurring motif in Pacific mythologies of a great big wall at the end of the oceans. I say alleged since this myth only appears in one culture and is being blown way out of proportion by flat earthers trying to find backing for their specific fringe theory of the Great Antarctic Ice Wall. Bloodfalls. In 2023, a large amount of waterfalls across Antarctica started turning red, after human interference. The phenomenon is still quite recent, but the explanation that scientists have come up with is that it's the result of an extremely fast-growing algae transferred by rivers by unknowing humans. Because, yeah, that's always the explanation, isn't it? Singing ice. You know how caves have a lot of echoes? Due to the expanded size of ice caves, which itself is due to the caves being ice and not rock, this illusion is expanded to the point where one sentence can create an entire symphony of echoes. Black snow. As alluded to earlier, Antarctica has volcanoes. Now, when these volcanoes erupt, the ash falls down to the ground to create a mixture of snow and ash that has a black hue. Visitor's land. Now, you're not meant to own land in Antarctica. However, some corporations don't have any regard for the rules. For this reason, the Monte Fisto real estate company was sued for the variety of houses they sold in Antarctica, but it was found that they could continue businesses more or less as normal since being inside one of their properties meant using the house and other structures built on top of the land. Iceberg B-115. Iceberg B-115 is the name for the iceberg involved in the Hope Bay incident and has supposedly been spotted all over the place, from Japan to Benin to Malaysia to the supposedly landlocked nation of Hungary. Some do look real, but overall these seem to be people photoshopping the iceberg into places as part of what's it called? A mime? Third man factor. Third man factor is a phenomenon where if a group of just two people go out into the Antarctic wilderness, they will end up going missing or otherwise end tragically. Thus, the third man saves them. The leading explanation for this, and this is by no means final, is that something about Antarctica just makes people want to kill their friend, but not if some other guy's watching, and this goes both ways. Imperial Japanese Antarctic Expedition. Back in World War II, Japan had finally broken into their colonization era, and they planned on basically sweeping the entire Pacific, all the way down to Antarctica. They didn't come close to fulfilling their ambition. In fact, they didn't even get past Australia, due to the Pacific Fair soundly being won by the Americans, but it's a fascinating read if you get your hands on their documents. Tier 6. Jenny Schooner. You know Jenny Schooner as an actor for a role in, Hotel Transylvania? I don't really know anything about actors. A schooner, however, is a species of fish that can briefly survive on oxygen it draws from the atmosphere. A specimen of one is called Jenny. It is the only specimen ever collected since 2006, since they've recently become endangered, and these particular scientists had a devil-may-care attitude. Admiral Byrd Theory. The Admiral Byrd Theory is a grand conspiracy theory encompassing the exploits of one Admiral Byrd in Antarctica. There's a lot of smaller aspects to it mentioned later on, but the gist is that Admiral Byrd experienced some pretty wacky things in Antarctica and is trying to speak out about it, but is being kept quiet by them, some group of folks. King George Island Arrowhead. On King George Island, geologists have discovered deep impressions resembling arrows beneath the snow. The arrows' rays seem to all converge on a point somewhere in the Norwegian claim. What's there is unknown. These were only uncovered 4 months ago. The story is still developing. Scott's Polar Party's fate. Scott's Polar Party was an event scheduled to be held on January 10th, 2016. God, I feel old. The idea was that there would be a party at the South Pole. Now, if you know anything about pies, you know that not everybody shows up at once, so someone came to the pie on their own first, and yeah, you can see what happens next. This started a cycle of people showing up, being turned off by the corpses, or occasionally waiting as a group of one, only to another person to show up, also solo, and then have them duke out. Colossal squid. Colossal squids are a species of very large squid discovered back in 2007. How is this tier 6? The giant hole. The giant hole, of course, refers to the hole in the ozone layer. Do you really think that the entire Antarctica iceberg would forgo mentioning something like the hole in the ozone layer? Operation Argus. People have some weird eugenicsy beliefs about Antarctica. Apparently, some mythical essence in Antarctica makes people born there stronger against the elements. Much about Operation Argus is still being declassified, but it seems that certain members of the Chilean government tried, or at least seriously entertained the idea of creating some weird Antarctican super soldier. Sex in Antarctica. Welcome to part 2 of Geez, these people in Antarctica got real horny, because, you see, when two Antarcticans love each other very much. Terra Australis. Terra Australis is a hypothesized large continent in the southern hemisphere that has been pondered since ancient Greece. The logic being that there's a lot of land in the northern hemisphere, so surely some in the southern one too. Antarctica is a big continent in the southern hemisphere, but it's still one of the smallest continents, third only to Australia and those snobs who didn't want to be part of Asia. Tier 7. Rodney Mark's death. Similar to the third man factor, every expedition team with a Rodney on it has ended in death. BGLE Tsunami. The Biology Geology Learning Experience Hub was a cool little place in Antarctica where visitors could take a short 4-day course about all sorts of Antarctica scientists. Then a tsunami hit. But like a very small one? It was the only place affected, but basically just an average wave. Antarctic Pyramids. Since April 2021, every other month there has been a discovery of a tetrahedron of snow somewhere between 25 to 40 meters tall on Antarctica. The cause? Who knows? Carl R. Dish transmission conspiracy theory. Remember Carl R. Dish? Some people think it teleported, rather than the current corrosion-based theory. Terra Nova expedition. Back in 1789, almost immediately after they started colonizing Australia, the British decided that they still didn't have enough room for prisoners, and set out on an expedition to find new land, wherever that could be. They found basically every island off the coast of Antarctica, but gave up before hitting the jackpot because nothing was big enough for a suitable colony. MH370 Antarctica Conspiracy Theory. The MH370 is a model of aeroplane most commonly in use in the southern hemisphere. There have been only 18 flights of the model, and 5 of them have ended in crashes. That's already alarmingly high, but all 13 of those safe flights over Antarctica have been done by the same plane, which is generally agreed to be safe from the curse. Do fish view humans as prey? Two fish, a species of swordfish relatives, see humans as prey. This is likely because the more or less isolated ecosystem of Antarctic waters means they don't have the same history of being hunted by humans that many other predators do. This relationship has been the knell of death for many Antarctic capsizing escapees. Southern sleeper shark. In the Strait of Gomez, it was discovered that all the endemic trollnose sharks had been put into a vegetative state. They were simply rechristened to the southern sleeper shark as to separate them from all the northern sleeping sharks, and the scientists went on with their day. Albatross brain eating. All sorts of places have weird delicacies. One delicacy in Antarctica is albatross brains. This all stems back to an incident in the Wilkes Station where someone put albatross brains in the rations, and everyone found out that it was a marked improvement over their other rations, even after the reveal. Hypothermia last resort crawl. It has been discovered by sickos who watch people die out in the cold that people who die of hypothermia in Antarctica often spend their last moments crawling directly north. The logic goes that north will always be the direction the sea is in, and if you can get there before dying, the shore will presumably be warmer than the inland areas. Larsen C ice shelf disappearance. On June 1st, 2004, a clip of satellite footage of a Larsen C ice shelf started spreading, showing a figure standing on the shelf before disappearing into thin air as an albatross flew overhead. Further analysis of the video reveals that what was actually going on was really bad special effects. There's even a frame showing the figure standing in front of the albatross. 400-foot ice ship. Ice ships are a kind of ice sheet, completely different from an iceberg, that floats independently from the mainland. These usually don't get too big due to buoyancy purposes, but in this specific instance, one was able to float despite being far above the normal size due to various caverns cutting down on the volume and sometimes even acting as air pockets. That's also about 120 meters in metric. Allen Hills, 84,001. In the small mountain range of Allen Hills, there are 84,001 subpeaks. There is a religious significance to the number 8. Bloop. The bloop was a rather funny sound picked up on microphones at the bottom of the seafloor. Some people thought it was a large, undiscovered aquatic titan, but scientists almost immediately figured out that it was an ice sheet falling apart. Organism 46b. Upon excavating an Antarctic pyramid, scientists will find a mound of flesh whose DNA doesn't match any other known species. Scientists will discover that it emits a unique low-pitched frequency that they will also find at Maud Rise, King George Island, the Rafaro Research Station, and in the Gomez Strait. Hot-headed naked ice borer. The hot-headed naked ice borer is a tool with an incredibly funny name. It's a kind of ice borer that uses flames created from its spout to melt ice away, hence the hot-headed, and lacks certain kind of safety mechanisms for more efficient usage, hence naked. 2016 Russian discovery of an abandoned Nazi base. In 2016, Russian explorers discovered an old research base that was formerly held by Nazis. This is not news. Of course Nazi Germany had a research base in Antarctica. It was a large imperial power around the middle of the 20th century. Really, the only reason this story got as big as it did was because the Nazis are a great subject for conspiracy theories, and Antarctica is a great setting for conspiracy theories. Real reason for the tree of 1959. People took the Hope Fire as a sign. They knew there was something foul lying deep beneath the ice, snow, and rock. The tree wasn't between the 33 nations. It was between them and 46b. They wasted a decade trying to raid a permanent stop. But the best they could get to promise them was 65 years of dormancy, and they couldn't even hold it to that. Tier 8. Entrance to Agatha. Agatha is a believed underground realm that is believed by a bunch of neo-Nazis and stuff. Anyway, these folks believe that maybe its entrance is in Antarctica because there's not many other good places for a pole to Middle Earth to be hiding. Earth Ice Wall. This is the same thing that the Great Ice Barrier entry was referring to. Why is this one on the list twice? And why are the two of them 6 tiers apart? Antarctica PBM Mariner crash cover-up. This one's obvious. The PBM Mariner crash was covered up because everything relating to mermaids was covered up. Get better material, jeez. Ningen. Ningen are a creature said to inhabit Antarctica, and they're really the continent's breakout cryptid. They're almost orb-like white bipedal little guys, said to be related to whales. The name also happens to mean human in Japanese, which adds some fun little eldritch points to their build. Hitler escaped to Antarctica conspiracy theory. Hitler escaping to Antarctica is a parody theory popular on the Spanish internet mocking the theory of Hitler escaping to Argentina. Their point, I guess, being that Argentina is simply too far from Germany for a clean escape, and that Argentina is a place that is simply inhospitable for Hitlers. Antarctica UFOs. Sometimes there'll be objects in Antarctica that fly and aren't identified. Ancient civilization in Antarctica. Just your standard, there's an ancient civilization that we don't know about conspiracy theory, just in Antarctica. Something tells me that if ancient Egypt went all the way back to before the Sahara was a desert, then we'd have like artifacts about it or something. Tinder in Antarctica. Sometimes, in Antarctica, people will long for a romantic partner, but not have one, and resort to using services that help find potential partners. Icewives. Icewives is a name for a recently formed J-pop band comprised entirely of cat girls. Their first album dropped earlier this February, and it is one of my favorite albums of all time. You'd think they just coast off of the gimmick of being a J-pop band made out of honest-to-God cat girls, but no, they put in the effort. Polar T3 syndrome. Any and all calculators, largely T3s because these are scientists we're talking about, brought to the South Pole will stop functioning. Because it's the South Pole, so some weird electromagnetism stuff happens there, and Texas Instruments doesn't bother putting in the safeguards like most other tech companies do. Admiral Byrd's media statements. Admiral Byrd has said a lot of things in the media, most of which are utter drivel, as Byrd wasn't especially good at discerning fiction from reality. He did kind of predict the coming of catgirls by saying, "I have no doubt that they will be discovered in Terra Australis, a race that is highly preferable to breed with than that of any other." He may have also been a massive racist. Operation High Jump, Operation Argus Connection. Okay, so you're telling me you're trying to create some weird Antarctican super soldier, and at the same time you give money to an Antarctican guy wanting to become stronger himself. I'm surprised they only gave him $50. Tier 9, Antarctic Rule 34. I'd put this as another entry, and geez, these people in Antarctica got really horny. But this one has more to do with the people outside of Antarctica. Some people want to fuck the continent and drew porn about it. Wait, this is how low on the iceberg? Oh yeah, this is definitely referring to the Treaty of 1959, and how it was between the 33 countries and Organism 46B. Grindr in Antarctica. Like Tinder in Antarctica, but gay. Operation High Jump Soviet Report. In response to the 2016 doping scandal, the Russian government was eager to find something to draw attention away from itself, and somehow the best it could do was bring up the fact that high jump silver medalist Martinez Naranjo was once given $50 by the Chilean government. They didn't even bring up the connection to Operation Argus. Entrance to Hell on Google Earth. A common claim on the spooky internet is that there is an entrance to hell in Antarctica on Google Earth. This is probably a version of that same entrance to Antarctica theory, after having gone through heavy semantic drift due to the internet being the internet. Tier 10. Antarctica isn't real. The theory goes that Antarctica, and everything I've said about it in this video, is false. And at least half of that is correct. Yeah, this whole video was a bit. None of this information was true. Maybe some of it was, but that's because topics I vaguely recognized, I use the information I knew about to cook up something devious. My motive is best explained in this cut intro. Iceberg charts are a unique breed when it comes to meme formats. This is because they don't aim to be a source of comedy, but rather a love letter to the works they're about. This love letteriness serves as their fatal flaw though, that being that some of their entries can make no goddamn sense if you're not into the subject of question. Take for example, Dusty Toys have Azrael's dust on them. I've decided to prove my point by taking an iceberg on a subject I have minimal familiarity on, and do an iceberg explained video on it, without researching anything related to the topic. Colonel Free Hat presents the Antarctica iceberg profusely lied about. Aside from the rest of level 1 and level 10, which I'm skipping over largely because they're joke entries and there's not much of a creative writing to do for them there, I have skipped 5 other entries. 2018 Antarctica stabbing, 2019 Chilean aircraft crash, and 2013 Mount Elizabeth plane crash because they both felt too recent for me to do a creative writing about, and penguin prostitution and penguin prostitution cover-up because I am just not into that.